Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. I'm your host, John Lowry. I'm excited today to have Barry Stowe as a guest on our show. Barry is a global insurance executive. He's run insurance companies that you have heard of literally across the globe. Barry led Prudential Corporation Asia, led it through an incredible transformation and a season of growth that was unprecedented. He then returned to the United States back in 2015, where he was the CEO and chairman of Jackson National Life and Prudential's North American business unit. He serves on a number of boards, and he previously worked for AIG and other major insurers. It is a real great opportunity for all of us to get to spend 30 or 40 minutes hearing from Barry Stowe and his experience and his expertise negotiating literally all over the world. Let's jump into this episode. As you think about early in your career, Barry, which was here kind of stateside, and then pretty early, though, you were sent off internationally to do business and to grow some of these insurance companies. What were some of the early negotiations that taught you some of those hard lessons that were valuable to you as you were going through the later stages of your career?
Well, I guess early on, when I arrived in Asia, and I was based, John, the entire time in Hong Kong, but doing business all over the region, from India, that was kind of the furthest west when I first started. And then, all the way north to Japan, south to Indonesia, Singapore, Australasia. So, a pretty big geographic remit. The first thing I learned when I got there around 1998 was, you are no longer the dominant force. You're not. The last thing you want to do is be the ugly American. You want to come in and say, let me tell you how we do things in America, because that's how everybody should do everything. You realize very quickly how proud people are of their own culture, and their own idiosyncrasies, the way they do things. And as an aside, one of the most interesting dimensions of living overseas for an extended period of time — I was overseas for almost 20 years — is you get a little bit different view of America as well, because you have the opportunity to view it through an entirely different lens, and you're surrounded by people who view it not as an American, but as a foreigner. And so that's a really interesting perspective, and that's a great educational opportunity. You realize that you're going to have to play the game based on their rules and the way they play it. And if you want to get anything done, you've got to do it their way. So you learn to very quickly adapt to that environment.
Yeah. And so what were some of the things that you learned real early? Do you remember some moments where it kind of knocked you between the eyes of like, I got to rethink how we do this?
Well, a lot of it, honestly, is just little things. It's just learning, being polite is a little different. Something that you wouldn't, some little touch, some little gesture that you wouldn't think of in the United States as being anything meaningful has enormous impact. In when you're negotiating in Thailand or in Singapore or something like that. So again, it's really just learning to adapt. From how you interact with people, how you show respect to people. Don't show the soles of your shoes in Thailand, for God's sake, because it's enormously disrespectful.
Wow.
The other thing I would tell people to avoid doing, one of your instincts is, I want to try to learn as much of the local language as I possibly can. Boy, these tonal languages in Asia are so easy to mess up. You can think you've said something really nice, it's quite the opposite,
Yeah.
So, you get up and think you've memorized a little speech in front of 50 people, and when you say it and you're all proud of yourself, and they gasp, so it's like, I won't do that again. So you just, you learn to take care. You learn to pay more attention, to be more detail-oriented until you become fully comfortable and functional in that very different environment.
Yeah, one of the things that I include in part of my trainings is actually a practice that came out of Japanese manufacturing called nimawashi. I don't know if you're familiar with it. And it's this whole idea of, as you're trying to build consensus, instead of just calling everyone into the conference room and having everyone explain their position and then letting the power play happen in terms of who ultimately is going to prevail in that, it's a process where people kind of go one-on-one to everyone that's going to be in the meeting and has the conversation to where hopefully by the time you get everyone into the conference room, you know where everyone stands, and hopefully you've achieved some level of consensus in terms of a solution that everyone can say yes to.
Exactly. You always want to go in kind of like a United States president goes into a summit meeting with, with Putin or Xi Jinping or whoever it might be. You want to have the deal already made.
Yeah.
And so that the leaders go in and, you sit in the typical horseshoe shape with the two main guys at the head and all the underlings sitting along the sides. And, they're grinning and nodding. And often we would go into those big negotiations with a prepared script. You know exactly what's going to be said, and the deal is largely done because you've done it in advance. It's critical.
So one of the chapters of my book, Negotiation Made Simple, that I've never really seen another chapter or another book on this, but I think has become an absolutely essential business skill, even if you're not doing business cross-culturally. And you've just described it in spades. And it's this whole idea of empathy.
Yes.
And the whole notion, everything you just described in terms of taking care, in terms of doing business and someone's culture, that's empathy. Talk a little bit about how the lessons that you learned overseas have made you more empathetic and how empathy can be a very critical business skill, even if you're not negotiating with someone from Thailand.
I guess like a lot of younger business people, particularly if you experienced, a reasonable level of success pretty early in your career, you can feel pretty cocksure about, your abilities and your position, and it can make you come across as a little arrogant.
Sure.
And, again, doing business in Asia, what a lot, that sort of sureness in your behavior, confidence, overt confidence that you might exhibit in the United States that people might take as a positive comes across as a negative in Asia. So I really grew up as a business person, really as a person in Asia, because it does force you to be more empathetic, to look at things through someone else's eyes, walk in someone else's shoes, view it from their perspective. And I think it totally shaped the latter part of my career, totally shaped it.
Wow. And so we've talked a little bit about some of the differences that exist with people, but talk about some of the commonalities of people. As you've done business all over the place, dealt with people from very different cultures, what are the things that are just common about people no matter where they're from?
Almost everything. The reality, the big important things, you find that humanity, the Venn diagram that overlaps, say, between Asians generally and Westerners generally is gigantic.
Wow, okay.
We all have the same basic needs. We all want our families to be happy. We care about our children. We want our children to be more successful than we were. We want them to have happy marriages and, all the things that deep down inside are your real core needs. We're all the same. And that's a really refreshing thing because, again, you show up in a place that's less westernized maybe.
Sure.
And, Indonesia or something, you think, my gosh, this place is so different. I don't understand a word they're saying. Their food's really different. That everything that, it's a predominantly Muslim nation.
Okay.
And they're just not going to get me at all, but they're just the warmest, kindest, most accepting people. I mean, I would suggest to you that it's a lot easier for an American to go and base themselves in Indonesia and become a respected member of the community than it is for an Indonesian to come to the West and accomplish the same thing.
Interesting.
Immensely warm, accepting people.
Interesting. So that warmth and some of that commonality that you find in people, how is it that you've used that to be successful doing business?
Well, I think it made me a softer person. in a positive way.
Okay.
In the U.S., if you say someone is soft, it's usually not a compliment. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to be a caring, empathetic person. And, I know you like to talk about deals, and, we did so many different kinds of deals where we were buying companies or creating distribution relationships in Asia. What it made you do in those negotiations, what it really put in the forefront of your mind was, I've got to create a deal that's fair, that's genuinely fair. I can remember doing business in the United States when I was based in New York City for several years working on Wall Street. And, one of our senior executives in the organization says, I want a distinct unfair advantage in every deal. And he was serious.
A distinct unfair
advantage in every deal.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, it's not the way to do business. Certainly not in Asia, but it's not the way to do business here either.
Sure.
You've got to make your partner that you're trying to do this deal with feel like he's won something, that he's accomplished his key objectives, just like you've accomplished yours. Then you've got the basis not for a deal, but for a relationship, a partnership. And that pays off commercially. Set aside, the ethical and moral dimension of this.
Yeah.
Just the commercial dimension of that deal is so much richer when you've done the deal that way.
Yeah. And that's where, I've talked about how, empathy, many people have described it as it's the human thing, it's the right thing. But I think a lot of people are starting to appreciate the fact that it's also really good business these days.
Well, absolutely it's good business. When I joined Prudential from AIG, which was in 2006, one of the first things that came across my desk, first major issues, was a distribution relationship that we had at the time with Standard Chartered Bank, which is a London-based, London-listed bank, but does business almost exclusively in Asia, Australasia. And it was the first bank distribution deal that had ever been done in Asia, and that deal was done I think it started in 1999. It was a 10-year deal. So when I took over, it had 3 years to run. And when we did that deal, my predecessors did that deal in 1999, nobody had done bank assurance in Asia. This is, lest I be using, internal lingo, bank assurance is simply selling life insurance products through bank branches.
Got it. Okay.
And, but when they first did this deal, it had never been done in Asia. No one knew how to value this thing. So, we apparently, the Pru guys and the Stand Chart guys sat down and they said, well, we'll pay you an upfront payment of this, and then we'll give you this much commission on this product and that on that product, and off they went.
Yeah.
Well, the deal took off just blazing glory. It was unbelievably productive relationship. And when the Stand Chart people, they're 5 or 6 years in, they look at it and say, oh my gosh, we're getting a minuscule amount of income compared to what the Pru is producing.
Okay.
And so when I first arrived and I sat down with their Asian CEO, he said, Barry, you're a good guy, I'm a good guy. You just don't notice, man. We're going to shop the devil out of this thing.
Yeah.
We're going to take it to every insurance carrier in the region when it's up for renewal, because, we just kind of feel like we're not getting a fair deal here. And I was like, really? Yeah. And he explained to me why, and I listened to him. I said, okay, well, let me take that back and ponder on that. And, we're certainly going to want to renew the deal and so on, but let me take back and think about that. And so I looked at it. And again, there was no ill intent at the time of the negotiation, but we really had unintentionally kind of screwed them. And they were not getting their fair share. And it certainly didn't reflect the economics of more recent deals that had emerged since that first deal had been done in 1999. And so I went back to them. I thought about it. I talked to our board, told them what I wanted to do, got permission to do this. And I went back to them. I said, I've gone through the data that you gave me, and I can't disagree with you. And I've thought about, what can I do to make you see that we're the right partner for the long term? And I said, anybody's going to come in here. You take this out to bid in 3 years, anybody's going to give you more money. They're going to give you this. They're going to promise you that. I mean, you're going to get a world of promises from everybody that you allow to bid on this. And I figured out there's really only one thing that I can do that nobody else can do, and that's renew it today. And he looked at me and said, seriously? I said, if you're willing to go into exclusive negotiations for renewal, we'll renew it right now. And we cut him a fair deal. We quadrupled the revenue that he was getting from the deal. And that partnership had continued for another 10 years and has been renewed yet again. If you're fair to people, and by the way, that produces about 20% of Pru's profit in Asia.
So there's so many things about that story that I love. One of the things, though, that really stands out to me is how you integrated some things into that only you could bring. And it was the immediacy of doing the renewal right then. But what that created for them that's really interesting was the certainty in terms of what the future looked like going forward.
Right.
And your responsiveness in terms of recognizing that, the deal may have been out of balance a little bit and being willing to bring it back into balance. At the end of the day, you probably gave up some revenue share with respect to the particular deal, but you gained substantially more revenue in terms of the length of the deal going forward.
Well, and not just that, but because this was not the most lucrative deal that they were doing, they had begun de-emphasizing the relationship in their bank branches. So yes, we certainly, on a unit basis, we gave up. Dollar for dollar, they were getting more of the dollar than they had been in the past, but there were a heck of a lot more dollars flowing through
Absolutely,
in the future.
Yeah.
So, sales skyrocketed in the near term. And as you say, that relationship, I don't know how you'd put a value on that relationship now.
Yeah.
I don't know how, and I candidly don't know how either party would unwind it. It's so deeply ingrained. Our systems now talk to each other. I mean, if they ever wanted to change it, it would be almost impossible. That's another thing we did going forward is push systems integration so that if they ever did get annoyed for any reason, it's really difficult to untangle.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it brings up that whole adage of sometimes you have to sacrifice a little to get a lot. And people lose sight of that. And the reality is it's not a sacrifice, it's an investment.
Right.
And if there's a return on the backside of that investment, do it because it's going to bring a lot of value. So I want to turn a little bit to your business and leadership background and be thinking about that a little bit and share some of your insights that you've learned through the many years in terms of being a business executive and leading others. First thing is, talk to us a little bit about your just leadership philosophy in general, and then we'll get into some more specifics.
I doubt if I've got anything necessarily that's profound or groundbreaking here, but I've got some core beliefs that I think are extremely important.
Great.
And the first is, I guess, really to accept that you're not the smartest guy in the room. That you're not in a leadership position because you know everything, that you're in a leadership position because you're temperamentally suited to lead.
Got it.
Great leaders surround themselves with much smarter people. I wouldn't characterize myself as a great leader, but I certainly surrounded myself with people that were smarter than I was. And in a technical business, like any financial services business, but certainly life insurance, where you need actuaries and accountants and all these risk people and so forth. It's critically important to find technical people, smart people, subject matter experts that you trust completely. My chief risk officer, my chief financial officer, my chief operating officer in Asia, this team of the four of us, you could call any one of those guys at 2:00 in the morning and say you had a problem, and they were going to come find you. We were all extremely close, could complete each other's sentences, and they all knew that they did not have to be careful about how they talked to me behind closed doors. It was. I still have the image, of sitting in my office in Hong Kong on our floor in the IFC there, right on the harbor, and my CFO is an Irishman named Adrian O'Connor. Anytime I'd see Adrian walking out of his office towards mine with a red face, I knew I was in for it.
Okay.
And he'd come in and close the door and sit down and I've just got to tell you, you're getting ready to do something so stupid, I can't believe it. And I'm like, okay, tell me what I've done. Yeah. And he'd explain it to me. And, as often as not, I was like, right. Oh, yeah, okay, you're right. I get it. And then, one time he got really mad. I'm just not going to work with that guy anymore. I just want you to know you need to tell him he doesn't ever call me again. And I'm like, well, okay, now you calm down. That's not going to work, Yeah. And we would, but that's the relationship I had with all of them. Uh-huh. They could come in and tell me things.
Speak
truth to power, and so the decisions were collegial. And, if I told him he was wrong or explained to him, well, there's a dimension of this related to the group that you don't understand, and then he would say, okay, I accept that. And he'd walk out of the room, and we were in lockstep at that point.
Sure.
Then his whole finance team, he said, this is the smartest thing we've ever done.
Yeah. What's interesting about that story is leadership kind of goes both ways. Leadership is a moment where, yes, you need to speak truth to power, mm-hmm. but as power, you need to hear truth, which is really important. It's always a two-way street. But then I love that story about, CFO walks in, kind of says his piece, you provide him a different perspective, mm-hmm. and he can appreciate that and continue moving forward, even though he's challenged it.
He understands that I've respected his technical view, the view of his team, but he has to also respect my sort of corporate political view that this is something we need to do. This is going to benefit us in the long term, even though it seems like it might not be the cleverest thing to do right now.
So I want to go back to that moment because I get a call probably once a week. I got one yesterday from a church, actually, where members of the executive team don't get along. That comment that you just made about I'm not working with that person anymore. How is it that you were able to generate consensus amongst the leadership team, or even when you had leaders that didn't like each other or clashed a lot, how were you able to get them to work together effectively?
Yeah, there's a lot of days where you feel like, father confessor. Everybody's coming to you and saying, you won't believe what he just did to me. And mm-hmm. you listen to them, and then you go to the other person. And so, there's a lot of that out there. And I think there's a lot of that in any organization. But I think it can be heightened in an environment where it's not of a bunch of Americans or a bunch of Brits or, whatever the nationality might be in a domestic environment. But you've got, a British, my core team was, it was me, 2 Brits, and an Irishman. Huh. And the sensibilities, even though those seem like closely related ethnic groups, if you will, it's different. But, the person right under the COO was Hong Kong Chinese.
Okay.
And we had, in the senior team, we had Malaysians, we had Indonesians, we had Japanese.
Yeah.
We had mainland Chinese people.
Okay.
And the sensibilities are very different. So there's opportunity for hurt feelings that are unintended. Mm-hmm. An American can make a flip comment that's immensely offensive to a Japanese person.
Huh.
And, they laugh about it, think, didn't I say something funny? And it's like, no, you just slit this guy's throat,
Yeah.
It's like, you never say that to a Japanese man. Never say that to a Japanese
Interesting.
Man. So so you do end up having to navigate that. Uh-huh. And, I found that if you're open to all those conversations, that whether it's the Japanese person or the Chinese person or the American or who, they trust you because you listened to them and you made an effort. A lot of leaders would be just like, oh, just go work that out.
Yeah.
Come on, just go, do it again. Come on, get over yourself. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that. Mm-hmm. Not in an environment like that. I'll give you a perfect example. And this was actually after I had moved back to the United States and was leading Jackson. We had a Vietnamese employee in Michigan, and I was doing a town hall meeting, and I was talking about our business that we had built in Vietnam. And it was kind of a long story, but I was describing to them at the beginning of the story the environment in Vietnam and how different it is. And, the traffic is just chaotic in Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi. And, these like cars zipping and motor scooters and bicycles still. And it's just chaos, the streets, and they don't seem to really pay that much attention to the traffic signals. And people are like, so I was like, the way you cross a street in Hanoi is, you kind of get a look and you just start walking, and you don't look to either side. You don't pay attention. You just walk straight ahead at a steady pace, and they'll go around you. They'll never touch you. I mean, it's perfectly safe.
Yeah.
And I was trying to describe this, and it's, kind of funny when I was up on stage in front of 1,500 people describing it. Well, this Vietnamese guy who was probably in his early 20s, he went to HR afterward and said, I think the way that Mr. Stowe described Vietnam made it sound like, it's just this chaotic people and they're, not very smart and just, it just didn't seem to me to be a very respectful representation of Vietnam. And so our head of HR came to me and said, this young fellow he's offended.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, who is it? Get him up to my office. I want to talk to him. So I called him in, and he was very nervous, and I, tried to put him at ease. And I said, first, I want to talk to you about what I said, but before I do that, I want to apologize because I tell that story about Vietnam because it's one of the places in Asia that became closest to my heart. We had a real business success there, but it's just such a terrific story that I love your native country, and that's why I like to talk about it. So I've got immense respect for the Vietnamese people and for the nation. It's like, okay, well, and then he explained to me his perspective, and I said, when's the last time that, you were in Hanoi? He said, well, I've never been to Hanoi. And I said, well, where did you grow up? He said, oh, I grew up here in Michigan. And I said, well, have you ever been to Vietnam? He goes, no. I said, well, let me tell you, you should go. So here I am. I ended up telling the Vietnamese guy, you should really go because it's a fantastic place. Yeah. And so I ended up selling him on how great Vietnam is and how this quirkiness is actually one of the endearing idiosyncrasies of the place.
Yeah.
And if you just stop, if you don't just dismiss people and tell them to go pound sand, if you listen to their story, and you'll be surprised. And the guy went back to HR and said, I think Mr. Stowe's just amazing. I just think he's one of the greatest leaders I've ever, and I was like, okay, well, mission accomplished.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one of the things that reflects that is such an important skill set is listening actually communicates a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And people sometimes listening, like I joke with people in my course, I have this section where I say you got to ask open-ended questions, and then you have to listen. And I thought, and I joke with people, I say, you probably think that sounds really obvious. And like, why are we paying this guy to tell us to ask questions and listen? I said, well, listening is actually the hardest part of it.
Right.
Because our minds are moving so quickly. And the reality is that if we are not intentional about sitting there wanting to engage with the person and listen, we will communicate things we don't mean to communicate. And if we don't take advantage of that opportunity, we won't communicate some things that would be really valuable to us to communicate.
All men are raised to be fixers. This is embedded in us, from infancy.
Sure.
This is the role men are supposed to play, And so, how many times do you hear a married couple's like, well, when I call him and tell him I've had a terrible day and describe all the bad things that all he wanted to do was,
give me advice.
Let me fix that. Why don't you let me do that next time? And it's like, no, it's when you're in a leadership position, when you're a man in a leadership position, it's like quintupled. You get this idea, well, I'm supposed to be able to fix everything. No, you're not.
Yeah.
You're supposed to guide the team to the solution. And the sooner you figure that out, then you'll no longer be giving the impression that you think you're the smartest guy in the room, and people will flock to you. They'll want to work for you.
Yeah.
Because he listens to me. I'm 4 levels below him. He took my advice. He liked my idea. There's nothing more empowering than people who think they're having an impact.
Yes.
If you can make them believe they're having an impact on the business, that's huge. What we actually tried to do in Asia is make our people believe they were changing the world. And it worked. We had a little block on everybody's desk that said, doing well by doing good. We convinced them that the more commercially successful company our company was, the better the communities that they lived in would be. And it's true. And I can tell that story. But the life insurance industry has immense social utility. And we never tell that story. If you've got a story of social utility to tell, there is no more effective leadership tool, because people literally believe they're changing the world by doing well.
For sure. I interviewed a CEO once, and he told a story about how his company was in a bit of a crisis kind of moment. And so he called this kind of town hall meeting, and he got up at the beginning of the meeting to kick it off and said, I'm really glad that you're here. I really value this opportunity to hear from you. I want you to know I will not be saying anything further throughout the course of the next hour and a half.
Wow.
I'm going to sit here, and all I'm going to do is listen to each one of you, one after another, share your perspective. And you'll be hearing from me later, but I want to do this first. And he said, after he did that, he didn't have to say anything. It had already been said by him sitting there for an hour and a half, just listening to person after person come and share their perspective on this moment that the organization was having.
What a great, I wish I'd thought of that.
And really, really powerful stuff. So let's go back to Prudential Asia for just a minute. You led some remarkable change that led to some phenomenal growth. Change is something that is always requires negotiation. It just takes a certain level of negotiation to get people through change. My guess is that transformation that you brought about, there was a whole lot of change that had to happen in terms of turning that growth curve northeast the way that you did. Talk to us a little bit about, how do you negotiate through change? How do you lead people through change? How do you help people deal with the reluctance to change?
You have to, I tell you the way I did it is in Asia. The first thing I did was look at the business and the profitability of the business and try to identify, the commercial issues. And what I figured out pretty quickly was that we were emphasizing the wrong markets and emphasizing the wrong products.
Okay.
So we were our largest volumes were coming from our lowest margin products and our lowest margin markets. That's where we were doing all
that's where you were spending most of your time.
Yeah, that's where we were spending all of our time. So that kind of jumped off the page at you, and so we had the wrong definition of success. So and I knew we were going to have to make some big geographical shifts away from markets like India and Korea and Japan towards markets like China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, places like that, where the market was fundamentally a higher margin market, and where the kind of products we wanted to sell would sell well. And so the first thing I did was I stopped using sales, top-line sales as the key metric, and I used a different metric, which is maybe a little bit unique to the life insurance industry. It's called new business profit, which is an actuarial calculation of of the long-term profit that you will derive from the sale of a product.
Got it.
So it's not just dollars in, it's what's the profit do I expect over like a 20-year period from that sale.
So that's right product, right customer.
Right. You could sell a $100,000 product at a low margin. You're only going to make $5,000 over 20 years. You could sell a $10,000 product with high margin. You're going to make $20,000 over 20 years. So I changed the definition to MVP. So we communicated to people through their pocketbooks. This is how you will succeed financially, is by producing this, not that. And then immediately, how do I do that? Oh, well, we'll show you. You do it this way. You sell this product. You focus on this market, not that market. So we did that, and that created a quick upturn in commercial results. Our profits started popping, within 18 months, and people saw it. And so they had the confidence that we were on the right track. And then I had to address the team, because the board was in love with the team we had in place in Asia, because they had done a phenomenal job over about a decade, 11 years of planting flags where we did not have a presence. So they had geographically expanded the business very effectively, very efficiently, done a lot of things right. But we were now poised for a phase of real growth that team was not prepared for. So, you hear the old saying, what got you here won't necessarily get you there.
Sure.
This business, these guys had been so effective at planting this business that it outgrew them and their ability to lead it. And so, of the 6 or 8 key guys that I inherited when I took over the CEO role, in 3 years, there was one of those guys left.
Wow.
We brought in a completely new team. And we started, when I took over, the CEO position in each country was invariably an expatriate.
Okay.
And 10 years later, when I left, we had a total between our asset management business and our life insurance business, and in Malaysia and Indonesia, we also had takaful, Islamic law compliant asset managers and life insurance companies. So we had about 26 corporate entities, and we had one expat in the local CEO roles. They were all run
so it became
by
much
locals.
more localized.
It's a local business.
Yeah.
To my original point, you have to become local.
Sure.
As an individual, you have to become local, and the business has to become a local business. Has to reflect local sensibilities, which doesn't just mean, oh, well, we're a British company, we can't come out here and act like Brits. It means our headquarters is in Hong Kong. We can't go to Singapore and act like we're from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You're in Singapore, you're Singaporean.
Yeah. You
adapt to Singapore. You play their game. You eat their food. You throw laws into all your sentences because they say, okay, law. Everything's Singapore, that's an idiosyncrasy of the language. Yeah. They'll say, okay. They say, okay, law. So when I was in Singapore, I'd make a point. Yeah, you like that? Oh, okay, law. We'll do it that way.
So let's get real practical for a minute here, because I think a lot of people listening to this, they resonate with that story. Or they're thinking about their own leadership and they're having to make decisions. But then right behind the decision comes a negotiation. So you make the decision, this executive's got to go, or the next 10 years is not their 10 years. There's got to be a transition that happens here. Now you got to go negotiate it. And so give us some insights for how you manage those moments after you made those really hard decisions. What are some of the things you can share with people who will make similarly difficult decisions in their context? How do they best go negotiate those kinds of things that will bring about change?
In terms of exiting people?
Well, yeah, in terms of exiting people, or just how to prepare for the negotiation process that will follow a difficult decision business-wise.
Yeah. Well, with regard to the people, honest conversation. You sit them down and you say, this is my perspective. I'm going to go in a different direction here. There's a job for you, but it's not the job you have. It's, it's going to be a step under where you are, and I can put you in that role, and I think you'll really succeed there and perform to expectations. But I understand, and again, particularly in Asian culture, that's a lot to swallow.
Sure.
So I had one individual I'm thinking of, it was Malaysian, and he had become a regional guy, and I was going to put him back in Malaysia, and he didn't like that idea at all, and I can understand why. And he said, well, I had been getting phone calls from ex-competitor, and I said, you should return those phone calls.
You should take one.
And tell me how that goes. Yeah. And, I waited for him and let him negotiate his deal, and he left it. So it looked like he was going up to something bigger and better. And he went on to have a very successful career.
Yeah.
And he's a lovely guy who, I'm still occasionally in touch with. So these people had, they had not done anything wrong. In fact, they'd done an awful lot right. They just weren't suited to the future. And so you treat them with respect.
Sure.
And you make sure that everybody wins. And again, of all the people I exited, I think there's maybe one person that, probably still doesn't send me a Christmas card.
Well, that's pretty good if there's just one. That is pretty good.
But in terms of the negotiations going forward after someone leaves, that then by the fact, in terms of internal negotiations, it's like when I did that, I didn't do that immediately because I think the worst thing you can do is come in and just blow a place up. You have to come in and spend the first 90 days as like a house guest, be really polite, listen, I mean, sometimes they'll push at you a little bit and you have to assert your authority. But you should, you have a lot to learn in the first 90 days. So you listen, and then you start, crafting your plan. You make chart out your strategic direction. And so when I got to the point, a couple years in where I was exiting people with some frequency, it can be disruptive to the organization. So there's an internal negotiation where you're going to the next level of people and you're explaining, here's who's coming in and here's why.
Yeah.
And you bring in people, it's essential that you bring in people of such extraordinary quality that the team looks at that person, listens to that person and says, oh God, I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, for sure.
And with partners, now in one case, the guy from Malaysia, my counterpart at Standard Chartered Bank, who I referred to earlier, used to refer to that guy as a junkyard dog. So he was not he was not unhappy to see him go. Yeah. But so in most instances, what I found was that the partners, be it a Standard Charter or be it in India and China, we were required to have partners in our business. Local Chinese partner, local Indian partner, and they immediately saw what we were doing and, that we were upgrading in terms of talent. Plus, I had gone to them in advance and told them, this person who you've been interacting with is not going to be here. It's going to be someone else, and this is why, and here's where we want to go, and got their buy-in on the front end.
So let me ask you another practical question. You've had to make this decision several times in your career. Recently, in the area of college football, we have not seen very good models of this, and that is when leaders make the decision to make a transition.
Yes.
Whether that be retirement, move to another organization, whatever the case might be. I think
You're talking about Lane Kiffin?
We've witnessed some disasters and how to leave gracefully.
Yeah.
We've not had that modeled for us well. And yet that's something that leaders have to do, throughout the course of their career. And so talk to us about, again, not necessarily the decision, but how did you manage the process? How did you manage the negotiations that happen around whatever the departure was, but then also the negotiations around how do you protect the organization and the people to make the transition as less disruptive as possible?
Well, first and foremost, the most important thing that you can do when you're thinking about your own succession is to have the candidates in place in the organization.
Got it.
I always think, when you have, it's one thing if you have an organization that's stumbling, that's not really performing at peak level, then you often expect to see someone come from outside. But the track record we had in Asia, where we had taken profits from, 150 million pounds sterling in 2005 to 1.2 billion in 2015. You're going to seriously go, for a public company to seriously go to the marketplace and say, we don't have an internal successor?
Sure.
It's like, really? Barry did all this alone? There's nobody?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've not set up succession, then you're a really poor leader. You're a really poor leader. That's job one. So that's the key: is make the board's choice really easy and obvious, and socialize the board in advance that this is what I think. Yep. You'll make the choice. This is what I think, and so I had that in place. My chief operating officer ran all the life insurance businesses for me, had less exposure to the funds business, but, we were overwhelmingly a life company. The asset management business is important, but his name's Tony Wilkie. Tony took over from me. He had his run, then he retired, and we had another internal solution. And it's critically important you have that lined up.
So preparation.
It's a big part of the job.
Tool.
It's particularly once, the first 3 or 4 years, you're thinking less of it because I've got runway. Yeah. And I stood up 6 weeks after I joined. We had an investor day in London, and it was 100% me. I mean, the CEO of the group holding company introduced me and left. And, I was there all day with my team, that I had inherited making my pitch. And I told them, I said, there's 6 things I'm going to do. And I articulated them and I told them why, and I took their questions, and it was a good day. And I was 7 or 8 years in and I'd done it all. And a couple other things. And so I'm thinking to myself, now I've got Tony, I've got several people, but Tony's probably the guy. And Tony's, he's straining at the bit a little bit here. Tony's ready. And I got to get out of his way. The right thing for me to do for shareholders, the right thing for me to do for the people of this organization, the people who rely on this organization, is to get out of Tony's way.
Interesting.
So there is a brilliance, I think, in knowing when to go. And I always use the example of George Washington.
Sure.
There is a brilliance in knowing when to go.
He gave up power when
walked away, and remember what George III said? This is the most significant man of our age.
Yes. When
he heard that Washington had voluntarily walked away to go back to the farm, even George III said he's the most significant man of our age.
That's powerful stuff. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Okay, a couple quick hits here, and then we'll wrap this up. First quick hit, what was the biggest negotiation mistake you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
I'm trying to think. Did we ever do anything wrong? I'm pretty sure we did. We got, early in my tenure when I was dealing with our Chinese partner, I think I failed to understand his significance in his world. And it was very early on. It was like weeks in. And I pushed back at something a little more than I should have. And then the guy who ultimately became my chief risk officer, who had been in Asia already for about 10 years, came to me and said, this guy, he's a member of the Central Committee, of the Chinese Communist Party. He's I was like, really? He's like, yeah, we probably should be a little more polite. Okay, I got you. My mistake.
Yeah.
I made it up to him. I found out what kind of whiskey he liked to drink. And I went to Beijing and took him some, and we had a really nice dinner in his tower, and we were pals from then going forward. You just have to show respect.
Yeah, for sure. Negotiation tactic. What's a tactic that has become part of your kind of toolkit that you've used that seems to be pretty successful?
Well, again, I think it's always making clear on the front end that you you aimed to have every party leave a winner. That's really fundamental to the way I think about these things. And I'm involved in a little startup business right now where I'm kind of acting as the coach to this young entrepreneur who's got an immense track record of success and is whip smart and is just amazing. But, he's in his early 30s and he has a tendency, he's still at that part of his life where he's pushing a little hard sometimes. And it's like, watch this, I'm going to rip this guy's face off. And I think, the reason he's got me around, I think, is because he knows, he's smart enough to know he needs someone.
You're the governor.
To say, listen.
Chill out.
Yeah, chill out. So, but another thing I learned to do in Asia, we were doing a deal, trying to do a distribution deal with United Overseas Bank, UOB, which is one of the largest banks in Singapore, and it's got pretty good presence in Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia. The chief executive there is a local Singaporean man called Wee Chong, Wee Chong, the Wee family. And Yi Chong is an immensely successful man, really smart man, just a delight to do business with. But ethnic Chinese and, very much into appearances and stuff. And he and I had developed a very good relationship, and we were making really, really good progress in getting the deal done. But we had competition. I'm like, what can I do that would show him respect, make him see how we regard him and his organization? And this is a family-owned bank. I mean, it's a big bank, and they own it pretty much outright, his father and him. And so I said, I'm going to bring in the chief executive of our holdco in London. I'm going to have him fly, not just, schedule it when he would come to Asia, because he'd come to Asia a couple times a year, know. And it's like, no, I'm going to have him fly into Singapore for dinner and fly out on the red eye after dinner.
So there's only one reason he's there.
There's only one. I came to see you. I came from London, 13-hour flight, to have dinner with you and pay my respects. And we still have that deal.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. Good deal. Well, Barry, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for your insights. Thanks for sharing it with the Negotiation Made Simple community. And hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
It was my pleasure, John. Thanks for having me.
As a podcast listener, as you listen to each episode, one of the key things is you want to take one thing away. One thing that'll make you better, one thing that will help you improve in what you do. And there are some episodes where it's really hard to identify just one thing. And that's the episode that we just had here. As I think about the one thing that I take away from Barry in this conversation, it's hard to identify which one. But for me, it was this whole idea of empathy. I love that story he told about the importance of empathy and being sensitive to some of the cultural dynamics that exist in terms of the people that he's doing business with. And that lesson applies to all of us, even if we're not doing business overseas. The idea of being empathetic with the people that we're trying to put deals together with, trying to understand their perspective, trying to meet them where they're at. At the end of the day, not only will you get the deal, but you will also get a relationship that will make the deal successful and lead to the next deal. So, incredible. What a rich conversation with Barry. I hope you take something from it and you go and you generate great success, not only in your negotiations, but also in your business and in your lives as well. Thanks for listening to Negotiation Made Simple, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.